Morning. Welcome to the Flash at 5 for Chapter 6 and Chapter 7 for Week 3. This week we talk a lot about internal consistency in organizations, and we start to talk a lot about how the difference between what two people are paid who are doing the exact same job could potentially be a problem for an organization if they don't have a fair process for coming up with these amounts. So many companies have a method of building their internal consistency through their compensation systems. And the one that we're going to work on first today is looking at the point method. So in this chapter, it discusses the point method and gives you a little bit of an idea of how to do it, but I definitely think the crunch the numbers makes you dig into these numbers a little bit more. So as we discuss the concepts and practices of the point method system, what we want to do is we want to realize that there are 6 steps to this process. Now, this can go very quickly, especially if you're an Excel person and you throw these numbers into Excel and have it calculate all itself. But I did not do that simply because I don't want you to have to learn Excel as well as learn this. However, if you are somebody who do use Excel or you want to play with Excel, this is definitely a good example to use. So we're saying that in this situation, let's assume that the total possible number of job evaluation points is 875 rather than 1,000. Based on the following weighting scheme, what is the possible maximum value of each compensationable factor? So skills, we're going to say, is 20%, effort is 15%, responsibility is 60%, and working conditions is 5%. So skills at 20%, multiply that by the 875, which is the maximum amount of job evaluation points available, we come to 175. So we know that the best person in the organization, skill-wise, in this job criteria can only get a maximum of 175 points. And we do that for each of them. So for effort, it's 15%, at responsibility, 60% of the 875, and working conditions is 5% of the 875. We then come down here and we build a table. And this table really is just looking at the numbers. Now, the first line, I did give you all of the information. And the second line, I gave you 2. The last 2 lines, I gave you 1. You can calculate all of these on your own. I do think that when you do it in the system, you should put your table together before you start answering the questions. But so we take our skills and we are going to go backwards. So we know that at 5, at the perfect person, the perfect skill level, is going to get that 175. So 175 divided by 1 is going to give us that 175. That's always going to be, in 5, is going to be the maximum amount. And then we just go backwards. Divide by 2 gives us 140, by 3 gives us 105, by 2 gives us 70, by 1 gives us 35. So if you have the least amount of skills in this job, you're only going to get 35 points here. And we do the same thing for effort. We always start here, and number 5 is going to be the maximum amount, and we back our way through each of these. And now what we're able to do is we're able to look at this chart and say, okay, now when I measure somebody out, I'm going to be able to come up with exactly where they fall in this skill level. A lot of times what happens with this is either a team, whether it's a board of directors or it's a compensation team, a team usually comes up with an evaluation. So how I have done it in the past is I've had the superintendent as well as the job foreman as well as a couple of the other higher level workers on a job come to me with this evaluation, and each person did theirs separately, and then they'd hand it to me, and then I'd look to see, okay, where do we fall? And sometimes it's a matter of everybody saying that this person's a 5, well, they get a 5. If somebody says they're a 3, somebody says they're a 1, somebody says they're a 5, then you have to kind of work with that and see exactly where that person might fall. And that's where a lot of times the HR person's experience comes into play, because you need to know, well, is this foreman, are they out having, drinks every night? Are they cousins? Are they best friends? Is there some weight that I need to give to the relationship there? Or is this simply that this person knows them the best and knows their job, or, whatever it happens to be. So we go down to our next session and we're saying, okay, if we're going to calculate our total job points, we're going to look at a guy who has a skill level of 3, an effort of 3, a responsibility 5, and working conditions of 1. So we say, okay, skill 3, effort 3, we've got responsibility at 5, working conditions at 1. When I take these numbers and I total them up, I come to a total job point value of 17.5. Now remember, we had a maximum that we could have of 875. So, not that we're giving this guy a percentage, but if we were scoring him on a test, we'd say get about an 82%. But that may be what we need to do in order to say, okay, when we're looking at his value, how much compensation are we going to give him based on the fact that he comes in at 82% of what our perfect person is? And remember that perfect person doesn't exist anywhere but on paper, but everybody has that perfect person when they're looking for that position. So we can take a look at that and we can decide at what point we want to compensate this person. Now, in the past, what I have done in industry is actually had a scaled chart of the amount of pay. So I would say, okay, anybody who's between 710 and 720 would get this amount. So you kind of scale it that way. Other places have different methods of doing this, and your company may be different. But usually there's some type of setup if you're working with this point system. So our next thing in this situation is we're going over to Chapter 7, and we're looking at what happens when we have some changes within our company. So now we're looking and we're saying, okay, our compensation is really important. It's important to our employees. It's important to everything. But when we're building our market competitiveness and we're looking at our compensation systems, we need to look at not only the compensation that we're paying to our employees, but what's other people in the industry paying? Because if they're not paying what we're paying and we're paying more, are we paying too much? What's the labor market look like? What do the national trends look like? A lot of people like to say, well, I looked at the national trends. And I can tell you that that's a really great thing to do. The only problem is if you're looking at the national trends and you're in Boston, you're probably going to have to pay more than the national trend. If you are someplace in the South and the cost of living is less, then you may be able to pay less than what the market is. So you have to look at the national trends and you have to compare that to your market. So in this case, what we're doing is we're looking at the percentage by percentage. What did the cost of goods and services change between December 2013 and June of 2014? So in this case, we look at what December is and we look at June. And to do the change, the percentage of change, what we do is we take whatever the current is minus whatever the past was, so June minus December, divided by the December number, and that's going to give us a 1.0869% increase. So we've seen an increase. Now we come over here and we can say, okay, well, let's take another step further and say, by what percentage might you expect the average cost of goods and services to change over the second 6-month period of 2018? And it gives you some really easy steps here. First, calculate the percentage cost change for the period July through December for each of the previous years. Why do we do this? Most of the time in specific industries or in the industry that you're in, you'll see that the first half of the year you'll see one thing, the second half of the year you'll see something else. In accounting, the first half of the year we always see a rise in everything because we have tax time. The second half of the year is definitely a downswing of that. So we start to see that type of thing. In construction, it was always those winter months were dead for us. We did nothing, while in the summer months we were doing 3 times the workload that we could handle. In manufacturing, it can tend to be a little bit more consistent, dependent upon where you are, what you're manufacturing, what the marketplace is. So we're going to first do that. And then second, we're going to take an average of these 5 figures and get the average cost change. Now, I am going to tell you that when you look at these numbers, if you're calculating this with your calculator, you may be getting different numbers. That is okay. If you're getting a couple, a little bit plus or minus a little bit, the difference is when you use Excel or when you use any type of system, it's not rounding. We have to round in this case to put it up on the screen here. So first we're going to calculate the percentages. So we're just going to look at, the numbers as we had said up here, looking at the change. We're going to go, okay, we're looking at now versus then. We're dividing it by then. We're going to take that number, then we're going to figure out what that percentage is. We're going to do that for each of these sessions. We're going to come up with an average change. So our average change of 1.0236%. Now, the step that we're trying to get to here is we're trying to see what's going to happen with the percentage increase that we came up with, that 1.0236%, and we say, okay, their initial average salary is $50,000, multiplied it by that, add back the $50,000 or multiply it by 100 as the book has you do, and you come up with $50,511.80, and so that's going to be the new amount. Now, we can do that if we're looking down to the next part of the problem. We say, by what percentage might you expect the average cost of service to change between January 1st and December 31st, 2015? Again, you're going to calculate the percentage cost change for the period January through December for each of the previous years. And then you're going to take the average of the 5 figures, you're going to calculate the average percentage, and then you're going to estimate what the salary change would be. So again, when we do this based on, instead of just half a year, if we do it based on the full year, we can see the percentage change is a little bit higher, which means that we're looking at the cost is a little bit higher. So I wanted to show you these different items so that you're able to take a look at your crunch the numbers as you go into these next 2 chapters. Remember, when you do this, it's always best to try my problems here that are in your textbook. Make sure that you're getting the numbers, and then go into the assignment, which is on the My Labs, and do your crunch the numbers for both chapters. Have a great week, and I will see you on the boards.